I'm Sarah Kavanaugh, and this is Peaceful Exit, the podcast where we talk to creatives about life and death. My guest today is Quan Huynh, and he is the definition of transformation. In 1999, Quan shot and killed a man in a gang-related incident. He received a prison sentence of 15 years to life, at a time when California didn't parole people serving life sentences. Many years later, the law changed, and Quan was released in 2015. Just 6 months later, he started his first company, and he's devoted his entire career to helping incarcerated people have the best shot at a second chance. His book is called Sparrow in the Razor Wire: Finding Freedom from Within While Serving a Life Sentence. Quan writes in great detail and a lot of honesty about his life and time in prison and taking responsibility for his actions. In our conversation, we talk about everything, from his writing process, life, to his work today. Well, hello there. Welcome to Peaceful Exit.
Thanks for having me, Sarah.
Quan, I'm so excited to have you here today. I first found you through our mutual friend, Tammy White. She shared your book, Sparrow in the Razor Wire, which is about your time in prison. And I was so moved by your stories. Today, you're no longer incarcerated, but you're helping those who are. And I wonder, could you tell me about the organization you work with now?
I work as the executive director for Defied Ventures in Southern California, and our mission is to shift mindsets to give people with criminal histories their best shot at a second chance. So I oversee a program that's called the CEO of Your New Life. We teach career readiness, personal development, and entrepreneurship training. It's a 7-month curriculum, 2,000 pages of curriculum. And it culminates in a business pitch competition that's judged Shark Tank style by volunteers that I bring in with me from the business community. So when we have these events, I go in there and I help lead and MC and facilitate the entire events.
Yeah. Well, you wrote so openly about your experience in prison, from the conversations with your bunkmate and the makeshift cooking to the violence and informal rules to survive. Do you think we need more firsthand accounts of life inside prison?
There should just be more accounts of people's lives. I think the narrative is, okay, they're in prison and they're just locked up and that's it. But I think life goes on, and there's some of the most beautiful human beings that I've met in my life are ones that are still incarcerated in there, or ones that may never come home. So yeah, I mean, that's just one place of many that we could find different stories and perspectives.
I would just love to know, what motivated you to write a book about your story?
It was after a talk I did in Austin, Texas. One of the people that was there, it was called My One Last Talk. And one of the people that was there was 4 times New York Times bestselling author Tucker Max. So what I didn't know is that he had brought in his team to listen to my talk, because he has a book writing company called Scribe, where they help authors to get published. And he knew what I was talking about. What I didn't know is that he brought in his team, and he wanted his team's buy-in to give me a scholarship to go through their process to write a book. So that's when he encouraged me, and that's where the process kind of began. I remember about 2 weeks before I flew out to Austin to begin the book writing process, I actually had messaged him on Facebook, and I said, "Hey Tucker, I don't think I have a book. I've read everything that you sent over. I don't know who the book for. I don't know who the audience is. Like, I don't think anyone would want to know my story." And Tucker, in Tucker Max fashion, told me, "Quan, your story's already told. Get your ass out here to Austin." So now he tells everyone, "Oh, I had to set Quan straight," Well.
Love to hear from authors about their writing process.
Oh yeah, that we had what it's called a vomit draft, where you just throw it all out there, and then came the editing. If you notice on the back of the book, on the bio, do you see where it says Quan Huynh has been described as a mighty warrior, magician, and a mountain of goodness?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know where I got that from? Would you like to know?
Yes.
So Tammy, when she came into prison and we were facilitating together, there's these sheets that we signed for each other. And it has like you write words of encouragement for the people that you interacted with throughout the weekend. And Tammy wrote on there to me, you are a mighty warrior, a magician, and a mountain of goodness. You're one of the greatest treasures of my life. And I remember reading those words, and it just, I don't know, something shifted in me like, oh my God, somebody sees me in this way. Like I never saw myself in this way. And I always just loved those words. So I appropriated it from her, and I used it, and I put it in my bios and everything. Yeah. That's how I get to introduce myself.
It sounds like Tammy.
Yeah.
How did you two meet?
Tammy and I met at Solano State Prison. At the time, I was still serving my life sentence. And she came in as a volunteer. So we facilitated in several workshops together while I was inside. And we're scheduled to be do another one together at Solano State Prison in April if everything works out.
Oh, she must be thrilled. I know that when I talked to her last, she said that she was really hoping that you would. So speaking of the back of your book, Brian Stevenson's quote on the back of your book says, "Redemption is one of the most powerful forces on earth, and Quan's memoir, some of the best evidence you'll find." Is this a theme that resonates with you?
That was so cool. One of the things I always say is, I believe all human beings are salvageable. Like a human being can do, the greatest act of good and the most evil act in the same day. Like we just have all of those capacities to do that within us. So
the complexity of being human. And I remember from the story that it was a job promotion or a management position that kind of sparked the grief in you and the emotion that kind of led to that moment.
I had been asked to interview for a management position, and I just think everything up to my life at that point, I had no sense of direction. I had already been in and out of the juvenile hall and the youth authority. So I just felt like, oh, this is finally, something's going to go right for once in my life. And they came back and they said, "You're not a fit." That's the exact words they used. I don't think they meant anything by it, but I think being not a fit resonated in a different way for me. I was feeling like I didn't fit growing up in Provo, Utah, not feeling like I fit in with my peers. And then coming out here to California, going to school for the first time with other Vietnamese kids, and also being teased for not being able to speak our language well. So I also felt that I didn't fit there. So there was this theme of identity, not fitting in, not feeling recognized. And I saw that play out in just everything that I grew up in.
Yeah, that makes sense. Another theme found in your book is peace. And this podcast being Peaceful Exit, I'm always looking for new ways to look at peace. And you found peace while incarcerated, and that really impacted my perspective. You decided to view that time in prison differently. But that didn't change the reality of prison.
Actually did change the reality of prison for me, though. Right? It changed the perspective of why I was there. It changed, prison became from this cold, harsh, desolate place to a place where I felt like, what does the world, what does the universe, what does God have in store for me today? What impact can I make? What good can I put into the world? And I just felt like I'm perfectly where I'm supposed to be. I'm perfectly at peace. I'm in some forgotten corner of the world, yet I am doing, good work. And I knew it, and I felt it, and I felt alive. I mean, up to that point in my life, I had not felt alive. I felt most alive in those workshops with Tammy, when I'm sharing grief and talking about difficult challenges with my own life, or sharing difficult challenges that the men on our yard were experiencing. So, yeah, I think it's funny because we created a video for people that are incarcerated, that are going through our curriculum. And we talk about freedom inside. And I tell the guys inside, like, you can find your freedom now. It's not waiting until you go home. And I tell him, I go, I've come across people out here living in fancy houses, eating great dinners that are more in prison than many of them in there. Even though I said I wrote my book for men that are doing long or lifetime sentences, I've been told quite often that book is more than for just people in prison, or, everybody is in some type of prison of themselves.
Not everyone shares so openly. What guided you while you were sharing these stories?
During my workshops, when I was facilitating, I felt that I was most effective when I shared of my mistakes. I shared of challenges I had. It wasn't from a place where I was teaching or telling. So I decided, okay, I'm going to write from that perspective. And here's another one thing I'll share with you is that there's this thing I call my table of truth, where who's sitting at your table, like the things that you're doing is to the choices that I'm making, the things that I'm saying, the way that I'm showing up is because who I allow to sit at my table. So this is my table too. So when I was doing my writing process, the people sitting at my table was my 8-year-old self. I had my father. I had David, who was the avatar of the person I'm writing for, is like somebody that's incarcerated, stuck in a very dark place, doesn't want to do any type of self-reflection. And I also had my table of truth, Mr. Min Nguyen, the man that I shot and killed. So when I began my writing process, when I'm writing something, like I remember some of the most eloquent, beautiful pieces that I wrote did not make it into my book. I scratched it out because it did not serve the people at that table. So I go, this is who I'm writing this for. This story is for them. So these 4 people there. And if it didn't, then I just pulled it out and I go, that could be for a different story or some of the funniest stories I share. I go, oh, this has nothing to do with the book. So that helped guide my writing process.
I love that idea of that table of truth. Well, I think I might have to create a table of truth for my book because
Yes.
I think that's a wonderful idea.
Okay, I think I found the paradox in getting very niche and very clear in who the target audience is that the paradox in it is because there's universal lessons in what I'm sharing for that particular person, but then people could draw some universal lesson out of it. I saw it. So I was like, oh, this happened.
It's almost as if you were focusing, you're actually also broadening out to a bigger audience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, amazing. That's so cool. So every writer loves a beautiful metaphor. And the moment in the book when I read about the sparrow being injured and then healing, but still going and still singing, and that moment when it was sort of the shift between being incarcerated and bitter and angry to, realizing that bird's been singing all this time and I hadn't noticed. And then to use that as the metaphor for your book, it's just so beautiful. Can you tell me a little bit about the sparrow metaphor? And did you always know that would be the title?
No, I did not. It was right when I was writing I got to that part and I'm writing about it and I go, this is going to be the name of my book. I would think at that time I had finished about 40% of my vomit draft. And that's when I realized, oh, this will be the title. So the Sparrow and Razor Wire, I call it my Sparrow and Razor Wire moment. About 11, 12 years into my life sentence, several things happened. I received a picture from my brother of my niece, that's his daughter. When it took me back to our childhood, I also found out that my grandfather, my father's father, had passed away. And then that also triggered me back to like, okay, my father died when he was 38. And at that time, I was about 35 or something like that. And I asked myself, like, look at what my father had did in his life, the impact that he had made, the great goodness he did in this world. And then I contrasted that with like, look where I'm at. Like, is this it for me? Like, was this really what I was meant for? Is just to be on this earth and just die here in prison?
What was life like after your Sparrow and the Razor Wire moment? What changed?
I suddenly became fascinated about books on the saints, and in particular, gravitated to stories about saints that had failed in their lives. yet had gone on to create these orders and legacies for themselves. And then that, of course, led into books on spirituality and meditation and personal development. So I'm going down all of these things, and my head was just filled with all these teachings. And it was just one morning on the prison yard when I was just walking, and my head was filled up with all these things. And that's when I had asked myself, like, why do I have to view prison as punishment? Why can't this be a place that I can remake myself? I remember that moment very well. Like the sun was barely coming up over those hills at Solano. I could feel the warmth on it. In the little blades of grass, I could see the individual drops of dew. And up above me in the razor wire is when I heard that sparrow chirping. And like I shared in the book, like the sparrows had probably been chirping my entire prison term. I did not hear it, but that day I heard it. To this day, every time I hear a little sparrow chirp, then I just, oh, look, here's another sparrow.
Oh, it's beautiful. And also heartbreaking because you imagine them trying to land on the razor wire.
So from there, the first thing I did was I checked into therapy, and I began 25 years after my father passed away, began grieving his death, going through the grief and loss process. So, of course, being the consummate bookworm, I became fascinated with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's model on death and dying, and I started reading into all that. And then I realized around me, like, wait, there are all these men here going through their own mourning and grieving process, whether that's because they've lost a family member, or a family member has divorced them, people have cut them out of their life. So I put together a syllabus and I submitted it to the prison psychologist who loved it. And I got to build and create the prison's first ever grief and loss group. And to see the very first session we had where men had not been able to cry or shed tears for probably years or decades, and for them to talk about stuff. And that's where I became like, oh my goodness, this is my purpose, this is how I can do good in the world and make impact. That's how I lived while in prison the last few years. Whereas before I was just living a minimal existence, had no sense of purpose. And then suddenly I have a sense of purpose. I have meaning in my life. I have fulfillment, and I'm doing a life sentence with not a possibility of ever coming home at the time.
So your dad died from leukemia when you were really young.
Yeah, 13.
How did that loss impact your path?
It was such a bizarre day, and I didn't realize until I was writing it. You know, I wake up. My father had leukemia for like the past 5 years already. He was in and out of the hospital, and in discussions now with my brothers and sister, like that was the day of our first communion. We all had in our mind, we're going to go to church, to mass, and we are going to pray after we eat the bread. Our first prayer is going to be, God, just let my dad live. And that morning, I remember I came into the restroom, and my little sister peeks her head up from the shower. She says, "Oh, dad died last night. We're not supposed to know." So I said, okay. So I go back into my room with my brother and tell him, dad died last night, but we're not supposed to know. And I just suppressed it. I remember all the shit, but in writing, I go, wait, we went to church that day. Everybody knows dad is dead. My mom's not talking about it. My grandma's not talking about it. There it is. Here's the priest talking about this is a celebratory day. And I think inside it was me, my brother, my sister. We did not know what was going on. And it just felt like a haze. I remember my sister threw up when we got outside when my mom first said, okay, your dad died last night. And then we never talked about it again. So it was huge for me to finally begin to grieve his death, because then I was able to write him a letter. I was able to see choices that I made, or the world that I had created for myself up until I had committed murder was like, okay, these were things to protect myself, but also very destructive for me and my soul.
Also allowed you to remember, like you talk about the road trips you took with your dad and how meaningful those were. So do you talk to your dad now?
I kind of do. I think the road trips that I loved, I get to do them now because I go into prison early in the morning. So I'm up before dawn sometimes and just driving. And my father loved the road, and I think I love it too. I like the solitude and the quiet.
You can just remember him in those times, yeah?
Yeah, Yeah, it was pointed out to me like, your father was when he created the Vietnamese Refugee Association, he got to welcome people to their new homeland. Like he got them to adjust. And someone pointed out to me, Fine, you're following in your father's footsteps. You're welcoming people coming home from incarceration to their new homelands. I was like, oh, yes, I get to do this. So,
And most likely when they come out there, even if it is the place they were born and raised, it has changed.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Stranger in a strange land for them. So technology has come and gone. And yeah, the world, I mean, some of our program participants, 25, 30 years incarcerated.
What had changed for you when you came out of prison?
The self-serve kiosks at the supermarkets. I remember that. Oh, I even remember walking up to the kiosk at the airport to fly out and punching in, and it was all touchscreen, and my family dynamics had not changed, and I didn't recognize how it was. Here I am, like, oh, nobody's really communicating effectively. A lot of the groups I was doing in there, we learn about effective communication, we learn about being assertive, drawing boundaries, giving I statements. That was probably a heartbreaking realization, and what a gift that I get to have so that I don't hold on to these toxic ways of communicating and this toxic way of holding on to, like not being able to forgive and things like that.
Mm. What are your relationships now with your brother and sister?
Me and my sister actually had really good communication. It was really special because I lived with her the first 2.5 years when I came home. So it was really cool to see like what a beautiful woman my sister had grown into. Because like when I first got arrested, she was, I think, a freshman in high school, and I just knew her as this my little sister. And then I was going in and out from high school, going in and out of the system. So to be able to live to see her as a responsible adult, that was really cool. Some of my biggest conflicts were with my brother. I think that because I think he saw me one way as coming in, and then I guess there was he couldn't like, wait, this is the gang member I knew from that band, so he's always gonna look at me from that lens. And I think it didn't totally align because I'm not that same person. But it's not that he did it in a judgmental way. I think it was just more that's the lens that he just saw me from. So we had some conflicts at first. We worked them out. So now it's just okay. This is a family. He has his family, and each of us are doing our way of living out here.
So I know it's not without struggle, but you've built this amazing life for yourself, and you've done some really impressive things. You started a business just 6 months after being paroled. How did you get started?
Well, I was part of Defy Ventures as also an entrepreneur in training when I was incarcerated at Solano. And I continued with some of their coursework upon release. And I was working at my brother's real estate company. And one of the first things I noticed was that the building that his office was in, they weren't getting cleaned very well. I was like, man, this janitorial company here is not any good. I used to work on the hospital cleaning crew when I was incarcerated. So I remember bringing up to him, like, why don't we create a company, a janitorial company? Why don't you create it and I could help manage it? And my brother's like, well, you can't just create a company out of thin air. But yet I still continue with the coursework. And then one day my sister-in-law said, hey, can you help me write a cover letter? And I said, yeah. So she's like, yeah, it's going to be for my uncle. The building owner here wants to get rid of the janitorial company, and they're just going to hire my uncle. I helped with the cover letter. And the next day she came back and she said, like, hey, my uncle doesn't want to do this, clean this place. Do you want to clean this building? And I said, yes, I do. And then she's like, okay. I go, can you give me the email of the building owner? So she gave me the email and I emailed him. At Defy Ventures, they teach you to introduce yourself, Quan Huynh, founder and CEO of whatever. And I was like, am I going to call my company? So I went on to GoDaddy and I started looking up, I want my company to sound valuable. So I was like, platinum janitors was taken, gold janitors was taken. And then I was like, what about Jade janitors. Like Asians, we love the jade stone, and so Jade janitors was not taken. $9.99. I purchased it. And I emailed the building owner, like, my name's Quan Huynh. I'm the founder and CEO of J Janitors. I used to work on a hospital cleaning crew up in Northern California. I'd like to have the opportunity to talk to you about cleaning your building. So he emails me back, says, can you give me a copy of your business license and certificate? And I didn't know how to go about getting that. So I asked family member, like, hey, how do you go about doing this? They said, oh, you have to go to the county courthouse, then you have to go to the city and file it. I was like, can we do that today? And I sent it back to the building owner. And he said, can you give me a quote? This will probably take me about 4 hours to clean. If I put somebody else here, I'll pay them for about 5 hours to clean it. This is the rate I would pay them. This is the margin I'd want. And I sent off the quote. And the building owner said, can you guys start Friday? Company's still running to this day. I could probably write a book about a million things not to do on your first month of running a business. I made so many mistakes, but I learned and I pivoted and I learned and continued, like, yeah.
That's the magic, continuous learning. Yeah. And using those mistakes as learning opportunities. My father actually always taught us to celebrate our failures. How do people leaving prison have the best shot at a second chance?
When we say our work is to shift mindsets to give people with criminal histories the best shot at a second chance, it's more, there's a flip side to that. And that's why we bring in people from the business community, the tech world, venture capitalists, because we believe those are the people that could actually help us achieve systemic change. I mean, we could have the most transformed individual coming out of prison, and if they're still facing barriers to entry in employment, financial services and lending, housing, all of that, there's still much work to be done. So that's why we intentionally bring the business world in with us. That's why we bring CEOs. That's why we position ourselves as subject matter experts in being able to reduce recidivism, help increase public safety. This is our work. And wait, it makes sense to also save the state money? Yes. And humanize people that are coming back to our communities? Yes, why not? But that's what we do. So to give people the best shot at a second chance, it's not just incarcerate them and then there is no type of rehabilitative program. There has to be rehabilitative programs. There has to be communities that will believe in them. There has to be investment and like people that will take a chance to hire them, or there has to be advocacy from like organizations like ours or others that begin to build employment partnerships and networks and to share and collaborate with each other in the same space. The first question we have to ask somebody is, do you yourself believe in second chances? I think my most interesting conversations and the ones I want to pull my hair out sometimes is usually with HR reps, because they're just like, this is what I've been told. But I go, but why? Like, they haven't even questioned. It's like, well, this is just part of our training. This is part of our policy. There has to be not just our program, which I love, but there also has to be continued advocacy and continuing building out the ripple effects.
What's life for you like today?
I mean, it's life, right? Like there's great days, and then there's days where like, oh man, now what do I do? There's a funder that just pulled their funding. Okay, so what do I do now? And there's all this other stuff that's happening. Okay, and then last year when the funding got pulled, I had to let a team member go. So that wasn't a cool conversation. But then on the flip side, okay, now I get to go back into prison, and I got to attend Harvard Business School. So it was like, I get stuck in traffic, and then I can remind myself, wait, there's 30,000 other lifers in the state of California that would love to be stuck in traffic. Like, it's not the end of the world. It's okay.
Sparrow and the Razor Wire came out after you'd been home for 5 years. What would be your second book?
I mean, I've been told, like, you have to write more.
You don't have to. I don't believe in shoulds.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I was very clear on when I was writing Sparrow. Once I went out to Austin, I was very clear on who am I writing for and what problem am I solving. So I think until I figure out what is my next audience and what problem am I solving and why am I going to hold them hostage to my thoughts and all of that and everything, then I can write something else. And then from there, who am I going to sit at my table of truth for this book? And let's get clear. And then I'll be going back writing again.
What does legacy mean to you, and what's your legacy, or what do you want it to be?
So during my editing process, I had a goal like, okay, 6 days a week, 8 to 9 a.m., 250 words a day. That was what I set up for myself. And I wrote. And some days it's a great productive day. I wrote 2,500 words. Other days I struggled and I only hit 225, but it's okay. But then when I got to editing, it's like circular and removing words. I'm sitting there for an hour, and at the end of the refixing a paragraph, I have like a net 7 words. So that used to drive me crazy. Um, then Ryan Holiday's book landed in my lap around that time. This book, Perennial Seller. And in it, he had posed a question about like, if you're doing a work of art, what do you want people to say about this work of art? And I remember I go, okay, I could say I'm done with the book and I could just be a published author. But I want my book 5 years from now, 10 years from now, somebody would still recommend it to somebody else inside prison and say, this could help you. Or, hey, there's this group we're running. It's based on this book, Sparrow and Razorwire. Come join this group. It will help you with your mindset change. That was when I asked myself, what do I want to do with this book? That is the legacy I wanted to create. And suddenly I found out Donovan in San Diego, they have a group called the Sparrow and Razorwire group, and they are studying my book to help them. I have had numerous letters from people in prison nationally, I don't know where, writing me and say, thank you for writing your sharing your story. It's helped me. I mean, I recently partnered with Edovo, which is a learning platform that puts content onto tablets that are given to the incarcerated. So I was able to get my book onto their learning platform. It's given entirely free. So overnight, 850,000 men and women nationally have access to my book. So that's what I wanted to do, and they're able to have access to it.
Wow, that's fantastic. One of the questions I always ask my guests is what a peaceful exit means to you.
Peaceful exit means to me is, did I try my best every day? When I was found suitable at the parole board in 2015, there's this process here in California where it's 150 days that you have to wait to stay incarcerated while they're doing the paperwork and all that. And I knew I was leaving. Like 150 days, I'm going to be gone. So I was very intentional about how am I going to live out my last 150 days in this world, in prison, connecting with the men around me, making sure, like, spending time, having meaningful conversations, and not get my head into like, what am I going to do when I get out? What am I going to do? It was like, I'm present, I'm going to be here. And before I leave this life, because I know some of them would never see me again, and I would never see many of them again, what legacy can I leave with them during this last time? So I don't know. That's I felt like I already exited one life when I left the prison, and I've entered into another. So
yeah, the way you're describing it is a death.
Mm-hmm. And I knew it. I go, so let me mourn now. Let me mourn these last 150 days with these men. And be very intentional and like sit here and listen to them and treasure these last conversations. And I'm glad I gave myself that gift.
Well, I'm so glad we had this conversation. I'm really moved by your story. Thank you for listening to Peaceful Exit. I'm your host, Sarah Kavanaugh. You can find me on Instagram at @peacefulexit, and you can learn more about this podcast at peacefulexit.net. Our senior producer is Katie Klein, and our sound engineer is Sean Simmons. This episode was edited by Sydney Gladue. Additional support from Cindy Gall and Sierra Austin. Original music provided by Ricardo Russell, with additional music and sounds from Blue Dot Sessions. If you'd like to support our show, please follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Rate and review us wherever you listen. It really does make a difference. And as always, thank you so much for listening.